Okay. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today at this session of the Paula Kantor seminar. This morning, we are joined by two distinguished speakers presenting today, Dr. Deepa Joshi and Mu Rani Sarkar, who will be presenting on their research. Dr. Deepa Joshi is the Gender, Youth, and Inclusion Lead Specialist at the International Water Management Institute. She's a feminist political ecologist by training, and her research has analyzed the shifts in environmental policies and how these restructure intersectional inequalities by gender, poverty, class, ethnicity, and identity. Her research on gender and water helps explore the links between urban and rural landscapes, particularly in relation to climate impacts. She has hands-on experience in strengthening gender and inclusion capacity of policy, implementing and research stakeholders and institutions, and informing policy-relevant shifts on climate, urban agriculture, and the environment-food systems interface. She has primarily worked in South Asia and to a lesser extent in Southeast Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, and Latin America. She's currently based in Colombo, Sri Lanka. We are also joined today by Mu Rani Sarkar, who is an assistant scientist gender research at the International Rice Research Institute based in Dhaka. She's a socioeconomist by training, specializing in gender and labor dynamics in agri-food systems. Her current research focuses on climate and water governance within broader dimensions of social inclusion. She holds a PhD in agricultural economics from the University of the Philippines, Los Baños. We greatly appreciate you both being here today, and we're so excited for your presentation. The floor is all yours if you want to start the presentation. Just to note, you're both muted, so we can't hear you.
So can you see my screen?
Yes, everything is perfect.
Okay.
Thank you very much for this opportunity, and Mo and I are honored to be speaking at this Paula Kantor Gender and Development Hub seminar series. Today we are going to take you to Bangladesh to talk about work that we've been doing to assess agriculture water insecurity experiences. And very much, of course, in light of the theme of this entire series, focusing on gender equality and social inclusion. The next slide. So just to give you an overview, we want to talk about water insecurity and women and how this is playing out in relation to agri-food systems. And we also want to emphasize why this is so crucial and why this adds a very unique lens on current understanding about women and water insecurity. We talk about the methodology and the approach that we build on, which is the water insecurity experiences scale, the WISE scales, which were designed by Northwestern University and have been piloted and tested in over 23 countries. These scales are very specific, and we'll talk about that in detail, can be assessed for household water insecurity experiences as well as individual water insecurity experiences. Our sort of unique take on building on these WISE scales really focuses on bringing the perspective on agriculture, water insecurity experiences, which we, as we will explain, are not really captured in the current use of the WISE scales. We call what we have developed in partnership with Northwestern University, we call it the AgWISE module because it's still a process in development, but we very much want to take that forward and to develop, a scalable model that can be applied elsewhere. And hopefully, in the future, we will be talking about AgWISE scales as well. Then my colleague Mo will discuss the key findings of our piloting of this module. And I will come back then again to discuss the relevance and policy impact of this, policy and practice impact. The next slide, please. So why did we want to focus on agriculture and water insecurity experiences? If you Google women water, challenges, you'll get these pictures of women carrying water on their heads. And the narrative is very much focused around women's need for water in the household domain for drinking and domestic purposes. And somehow that narrative creates a mythical picture that women's challenges with water are restricted to the household drinking domestic use purpose. And this was really an outcome of the fact that the integration of gender in water, which started in the 1980s, coincided with two significant events: the International Decade for Women, and then also the International Decade for Water Supply and Sanitation, which followed one after the other. And somehow that sort of really strengthened the narrative that women's challenges around water are related to drinking domestic uses. Now, that is not untrue, but what we want to emphasize is that is not the entire truth as well. And also, somehow, this narrative about women and their drinking domestic water challenges, creates some sort of a binary picture, a division between domestic and productive. When we say productive, it's water for productive purposes. Here we specifically refer to agri-food system related issues like livelihoods, activities. So it creates somewhat a binary between domestic and productive water uses and women and men, and links women with domestic water issues and men with productive water issues. And we really sort of, there's a lot of literature which is beginning to question this sort of a binary narrative. And also, we what we really wanted to assess is that, water scarcity and insecurity, does it really result in sort of a universal experience of these challenges between women and men? Because that's also something that the picture presents, that all women are deeply challenged by domestic water insecurity experiences and men are by productive water insecurity experiences. And it does not further disaggregate which women, how, why, and similarly which men, how, why. So, we wanted to add an intersectional lens in this analyses. Now, for all of us, especially CGIR gender researchers who've been working in the agri-food systems, we're very well aware of women's roles in agri-food activities and the fact that water is such a key element of anything related to agri-food activities and interventions. So unfortunately, that remains a very sort of, there's very limited study and analyses around these issues, especially when we compare to all the literature and evidence that there exists in relation to women and drinking domestic water needs, challenges, etc. And also, we are very much aware that climate impacts are primarily experienced through water. So, either too little water, too much water, and that these impacts are also shaping a feminization of, we say labor, agricultural labor, because we understand from our study and from other studies that the climate is driving a lot of male out migration in many of the hotspots that we have identified. But then while women take on agriculture, increasing agriculture responsibilities, they don't really control these decisions but the labor, their work and their activity and their labor in agri-food systems increases, but not with, not necessarily proportionate to their control of these agri-food systems, the incomes earned, etc. So we also wanted to assess how climate impacts on agri-food water systems are shaping, women and men's water insecurity experiences. And finally, the thing that we wanted to assess is that when we talk about water challenges, whether it's in relation to drinking domestic water or whether it's relation to, agri-food systems, often we only talk about the physical and material and technical dimensions of these issues. So our sort of choice for working with Northwestern University and building on their WISE scales was also because that is one of the few scales, or perhaps the only one, that focuses also on the psychosocial impacts of water insecurity experiences. The next slide. Okay, so why Bangladesh? Obviously, Mo Sarkar is there doing the field work, but other than that, Bangladesh is a really interesting place in our view to sort of look into these issues. First of all, this work that was done on developing a methodology for mapping climate, agriculture, gender inequality hotspots by our CGIAR gender colleagues, identified that Bangladesh is definitely one of the countries which has a large number of these climate, agriculture, gender inequality hotspots. Although this study does not, have a water lens as well to it. So that was also our contribution to this study. And Bangladesh is interesting because this very recent analysis done by the World Bank and the production of this poverty and equity brief identifies that, Bangladesh, which has been known for quite some time as South Asia's sort of growing, emerging economic growth, country, and recording very robust economic growth as well as social progress since 2010, leading to declines of poverty. And so it presents, like, on the one hand, there in the recent past, there's been very positive analyses of poverty decline in Bangladesh, but a study by the World Food Programme just before COVID hit in identified that food insecurity persists across Bangladesh, and climate is really shaping these challenges. But post COVID and also post all of these challenges that Bangladesh has recently encountered, I think I'm missing the presentation slide. Okay, there, I have it. I has identified that, of the 36% of people who are still identified as vulnerable to poverty, almost 1.2 million people have been at very high risk of falling back into poverty for all of these reasons. Also, so there is growth on the one hand, but a persisting poverty and persisting food insecurity in Bangladesh. The other contradiction is that the World Economic Forum's assessment of gender inequality or gender equality identifies Bangladesh as the most gender equal country in South Asia, a position that Bangladesh has consistently held for a couple of years. However, other studies, including by the Ministry of Women and Children Affairs in Bangladesh, have identified that gender social norms are highly unequal in Bangladesh, and contrary to progress recorded elsewhere, there is a lot of resilience to change, at various levels, which result in, full benefits and empowerment not really being achieved by women, held back because of these persisting unequal gender social norms. And then finally, the third point, which is really relevant, is that Bangladesh is obviously very vulnerable to climate change. In several years, it has remained as the seventh most vulnerable country to climate change. And this recent study by World Bank identifies that nearly 1 in 3 persons in Bangladesh living either in the urban or the rural context face heightened climate risks. So for all of these reasons, Bangladesh was obviously a very interesting place to look at water insecurity and agri-food systems. The next slide, please. So in the last couple of years, supported by the Asian Megadeltas initiative initially and the Scaling for Impact Science program later on, we've been doing a couple of studies to really look at how water systems are changing in the southern coastal areas, the sort of deltaic floodplains of Bangladesh. Now, what's very interesting, we have these publications that we have. One is in the Dialogue online magazine, and the other is a published paper. What's interesting is that 92% of Bangladesh's agriculture community are smallholders, and climate, really makes their future quite insecure. Of this group, significantly large number are landless and depending on agricultural labor, fishing, livestock, and other livelihoods. Because of these reasons, because these livelihoods are unreliable, unpredictable, and not really sustaining household, food security as well as income, there is a large, there's evidence of significant male out migration, also female out migration in Bangladesh, which is leading to situations where women increasingly take on agricultural labor work in addition to their domestic care work. However, this labor is largely unpaid, also invisible, and uncompensated for, unaccounted for in the policy and also other domains. And despite the fact that women are increasingly responsible for agri-food systems, crop production, disparities in land ownership persist, there's unequal access to inputs, credit, markets, institutions, all of these shaped by a very masculine institutional context, a social context, and resilience to change in these sort of settings of masculinity. I don't want to go into the details of, how the waterscapes in the southern coastal deltas are changing. This is something that we've written in the paper that is also showing up on the slide. But due to various infrastructure and policy changes, the southern coastal deltas, which were the floodplains, the tributaries of Bangladesh's numerous rivers running into the sea, there's very high salinity in these areas. And in fact, this area is often referred to as a desert in the deltas. And especially in the dry seasons, there is acute freshwater scarcity. So freshwater as a resource is very much contested, and the struggles over freshwater are unequal, shaped by power, patriarchy, and social economic sort of disparities. And there is significant food and nutrition insecurity in these contexts. So, these were all the reasons which also make the studying, the analyses of the gender dynamics of agriculture water insecurity very interesting. The next slide. So, we work together with Northwestern University and build upon their WISE skills. And this is where I hand over the presentation to Mo. Over to you, Mo.
Yeah, so thank you, Dr. Deepa. You can hear me, right? Clear? Yeah. So a little about the WISE skills. So there are actually 4 types of water insecurity experience skills, which is developed by Northwestern University. There is a AgWISE, there is a AgWISE. So AgWISE means the individual level household water insecurity experience, and AgWISE is household level water insecurity experience skills. And they have 12 items, which you can see in the screen. And then there is also a summary like AgWISE and AgWISE, which has only 4 items. But the original one, that one with 12 indicators, it actually started in Kenya, and then it has been piloted in 23 low and middle income countries. So so it has a lot of collaborators, and it also very scalable, relevant tools that has been used very widely and verified it in different place. And that's why we actually interested to use the WISE skills in agri-food systems. So these are like 4 key outputs that we developed in the last few years, and we also intend to publish the more output in coming years, and all are available in online. You can always go and check those output. You can read. Now, before going to the details of my research findings, I just wanted to give you a summary of what I'm going to present today. So first, our findings actually, AgWISE finding actually challenge the dominant narratives around the domestic and productive water use. And the common assumption is that women are primarily responsible for domestic water, while men control the productive water. However, our results shows that this binary does not really hold in practice. Both men and women actually engaged with the domestic and productive water, as their roles, responsibilities, and constraint differs. And second, we wanted to look at this water insecurity is actually shaped by intersectional inequalities. It's not felt everyone by the same extent. So access, control, and use of water are not simply determined by the availability, but by the local geography, power relations, socioeconomic relationship, social hierarchies. And the privilege, land ownership, also in some extent, the institutional arrangement influence who can access and control water in the coastal region. In many cases, formal and informal rules, including leasing canal bodies, and local government practice in the ground, are also interpreted or negotiated in ways that enable unequal water appropriation. And finally, as Dr. Deepa mentioned a bit earlier, that beyond the physical and material challenges, water stress also generates a significant psychosocial impact, such as anxiety, worry, sleep disruptions, experience of harassment, which is largely not explicit by the researcher. So these effects are particularly pronounced for women, and what happened in the coastal region is that although women face the extended burden of psychosocial impact, but due to the social norms, often condition women to remain silent and or cope with the stress. So now our tools, AgWISE modules, agriculture water and security experience modules. So as Dr. Deepa mentioned, then we adapted the WISE skills methodology to examine a agri-food system. So for this, we actually collaborated with Professor Sarah Young from Northwestern University, who is the pioneer of WISE skills, and contextualize it for the agri-food system, which now we call it AgWISE module. And we define agriculture water insecurity experience as a lack of access to and benefits from adequate quality and reliable water for agricultures that produce negative consequences for human lives. During the initial development, we had lots of stakeholder engagements, a meeting with the key ministries, the people that work in the government at the local level. And we had several field visits, pilot testing, and then finally we came up with 12 items, which you can see in the screen, from ORI to interruption, chain, decision, food, so on, and up to fishery. So each item is phrased as, when we ask question at the ground, each item is phrased as, in the past 12 months, how often have you or someone else in your household worried about problems with agricultural water, like too much water or too little water, not clean, or conflict about water for your food productions? So, or it can be due to the climate stress, like cyclone, drought, flood, or canal grabbing. And so we actually frame each of the questions like this way. So AgWISE also can be implemented at the household or also at the individual level. So when we say that how often you in the household, that's mean the individual level, and when we say how you or someone else who work with agriculture experience agriculture water insecurity, so this is the household levels. So to know more about, please read our manuals. That's all are in the online. I will try to give in the chat box the link. So now, while we applied our AgWISE modules, so we conducted this study in Butiakhata and Paikgacha Upazila in Khulna district, which is a highly climate exposed southwestern coastal regions, and this area has salinity intrusion, then canal water-based water systems, and competing water uses, and canal leasing. So all of the reasons, that's why we choose this area. So we surveyed around 400 households, interviewing men and women separately to capture the inter-household variation in the experience of water insecurity. And then to complement this, we also conducted FGDs to explore the collective perception, social norms, and local government dynamics and water access. And methodologically, we actually applied agriculture water insecurity AgWISE module and WISE module at the individual level. Okay, so now coming to the study findings, our first findings started with the common assumption is that women's water needs are confined to the domestic needs and men to the productive water. But our findings really challenge this directly. So what we found in the ground is that women's needs water beyond household needs. So they require water for farming, livestock activities, fishing, and then other livelihood activities. And their role have expanded further when there is a male out migrations. And in the absence of men, women actually take all the responsibility for household, for the farm, and also for the care work. Similarly, domestic water also managed by men, but man involvement is often socially restricted. As you will know, in the developing South Asian countries, always happen. It's not very, it's not seen as a masculine to men bring water, but they participate under certain condition, like when their spouse is sick, they are not at home, or water source is far away from the home. But I also seen that some men genuinely help their wife, and they willingly collect water for their wife. So now you can see from the figure about 74% of men and 58% of women are experienced agricultural water insecurity. And similarly, also 29% of men and 43% of women are experienced domestic water insecurity. So when water is scarce, is actually disrupt not only the household routines, but also the agricultural activities, especially when the same water source actually used for the domestic and productive purposes. And this overlap means that domestic and productive water needs are very closely interconnected. And the conventional sectoral separations between them does not reflect that how the water is experienced in everyday life. But from the figure, you can see what is very distinguished from their experience is the intensity of the burden. Women actually face the triple burden because of managing water for household care work and the product activities, and which happen actually simultaneously, which create a significant time burden and labor pressure. And this burden is further intensified when there is a structural constant, when water is not readily available when they need it. There is a salinity in water or no water at all. And access is really controlled by someone else, by some influential factors, by canalizing. So women typically cannot decide independently when to access water, negotiate, or reorganize their work around the uncertainty. And our second findings about another assumption that water insecurity actually experienced equally by everyone. But what we found is a different reality. Water insecurity is highly differentiated and shaped by socio-demographic, socio-economic power relations, and this factor determine who can access water and under what conditions. So from the figure, you can see that men reported constantly high level of productive water insecurity across all age group. But adult group of 31 to 60 years, they experience higher insecurity, which means they have continually involved in the field-based activities and irrigation practice than the younger one, because younger people no longer wanted to stay in agriculture. However, for the women, the pattern is very different. Older women, they report the highest level because around like 70%, 76% older women experience water insecurity. And this is because their role and mobility place them like highly field-based work, because the younger women, they cannot go out for field work due to social norms. And for our next category, widow men report the highest level of insecurity, almost 100%. And among men, 75% around widow and divorcee women by the household they have the higher level of water insecurity than married women. And these women actually often describe that management of land and water become more uncertain and difficult in the absence of a spouse of male members. Same for the household structures. In the male-headed household, you can see that nearly all men and women experience body water insecurity. But if you look at the female-head households, 100% women they reported that water insecurity seriously affected them because they have limited power in the decision-making spaces. So one woman actually noted that even she can manage the land, but it is very inappropriate for her to speak in the main domain for the water. And you can also see from the figure that economic and land inequalities also play a very critical role. So lower income class, landless and smallholder farmers, they really rely on this uncertain negotiation access to waters and often depending on the rain water or waiting for the canal waters. So they experience the highest water insecurity. In contrast, large landholders secure water through infrastructure, they have financial resources, political collection, so they have less experience. The other interesting finding is that the institutional mechanism, there is a water management group to manage the water at the canal system, but from the figure you can see this that does not really help too much. So membership can improve access to a certain degree, but still women participation remain very limited, very symbolic, and with little influence in the decision making. So our third assumption, third myth is that water insecurity is only the physical problems, but for us it is much more than this. So our respondent constantly describe that water insecurity as something that they live with daily, which affect them mentally, which they express as which they locally say that pani jonno kosto, which is that suffering for water, or pani theke kosto, suffering from water. So our AgWISE data also shows that emotional consequences of anxiety, anger, helplessness, and sleep disorder, harassment for agricultural water. And these emotional burdens are not occasional; they are very much continuous and deeply embodied. So more than 90% of men and women speak about the constant worry about the water. So they describe their water availability, whether it would come, whether it will not, whether it will be enough water in the canal, or how long it will stay, or it will be enough for them to harvest their crop. So respondent explained that the people explained that entire communities depend on very limited and uncertain water source of the canals, for example, canals and ponds, and they share water from the canals and ponds for the household and productive work. And the thing is, in the study area, rain-fed almond is the main crop, and very few can produce in the dry seasons, and that's depending on the canal waters. And the photo in the right, you can see this is taken from the study area, and this is in a dry period. So you can see the extent of scarcity of canals where water is completely, there is no single drop of water. And similarly, the area is highly prone to cyclone, periodic cyclone. Every year, it suffers from cyclone, and there is a prolonged flooding that damages the crops, and it creates another level of uncertainty during almond season. So more than half of men and women reported the sleeping disorder for uncertainty, wake up at the night to check what water conditions, whether their livestock is okay or that it damaged their crop or fish is gone, something like that. So sometimes worry is often accompanied by anger, frustrations when they have to negotiate with others for the waters. And water is also shaped by social relations, sometimes through conflict or violence. So men frequently describe that there is a dispute or tension around the water, around the canal access water for irrigations. But for the women, they said with the disputes, they have a different dimensions like discomfort and fear, harassment when they're moving around the public space to access water. And they say that sometimes there is verbal abuse, there is a taunt, questioning about their presence, and passing comments. To sum up this, like water challenges are deeply linked to psychosocial stress, going beyond the physical, economic, or challenges, food challenges that conventional research are largely emphasized. However, what is particularly striking is the scale of physical psychosocial stress. Around 86% of men and 78% of women reported such experience. You can see from the figure. So you can think, since women bear the double water burden or both challenges, so how their psychological stress level is lower than men. So the reason we identify is that the men tend to express anger and frustration more openly with others, where women, on the other hand, are less likely to express the anger publicly. So women express that showing anger does not improve access to water, but it actually carry the social consequences. They called as bad women, bad women. So as a result, so they try to internalize stress and experience it through silent worry, exhaustion, and emotional strain. So to sum up our study findings, so we think that there is a need to rethink how we understand and measure water insecurity in agri-food systems. And the AgWISE tool actually advanced this understanding by bringing men and women live experiences to the centers of connecting water insecurity, not only to the agriculture, but also a broader question of climate vulnerability, governance failures, ecosystem dependence. And importantly, AgWISE actually moves beyond the computational tools, and it integrates water needs, including water for crops, for livestock and ecosystem that sustain these livelihoods. And it also brings attention to intersectional exclusions, showing how insecurity is shaped but not only the gender, but also by the other social identities, And then at the same time, AgWISE it adopts a human-centered approach. It's a life experience of everyday life experience of men and women. So it goes beyond the physical and material dimensions to capture the psychosocial experience that are often overlooked. And finally, I can say that AgWISE is a multidimensional lens of measuring water insecurity as a lived and relational experiences. So for the next slide, I really like to call Dr. Deepa.
Okay, thank you so much, Mo. So going forward, our focus, as I said earlier, is to try and sort of institutionalize the AgWISE module and perhaps move it to, the sort of at par with the WISE scale. So moving from the module to the scale. And this will require sort of refining the module, piloting it in a couple of different places, which is what we intend to do now in 2026. We want to, pilot the module again in 6 climate hotspots in Bangladesh and possibly also in Cambodia. And we also want to look at water for ecosystems, water for nature, which is really key critical because it defines the availability and security of water for domestic and productive needs. So we want, and also that um, biodiversity resources are often used and form a very important livelihood component of the most marginalized group. So this is something that we want to take forward. And then in Bangladesh, supported by the Scaling for Impact program, we have been working with the Ministry of Finance to really try and sort of move their current spending of the gender responsive budget towards doing really a good planning, budgeting, and you know monitoring outcome of this spend of the gender responsive budget. And Bangladesh is one of the few countries where 30% of the budget of every department, of every ministry is being is allocated for gender responsive activities. However, at the current moment, what is happening is that this budget is allocated and it is reported as spent, but there is no outcome mapping. So we would, like to influence outcome mapping, and we therefore also want to work with the Ministry of Water Resources to see if they are also able to build data and statistics on agriculture water insecurity, as well as the domestic water insecurity through the use of the gender budget. And this is something that we intend to do this year, supported by the Scaling for Impact program, work together with the Ministry of Finance, Water Resources, and the Women Affairs Ministry to try and see how we could take forward, build more solid evidence and data around water insecurity, and also use the data to shape programs and other activities in these departments. Thank you so much. That's the end of our presentation. We're very open to questions.
Thank you so much for your presentation today. This was extremely insightful, and I know many of us enjoyed the presentation. I would like to open the floor now if any of the participants today in the seminar have any questions they would like to pose. You can raise your hand, speak up, or put your question in the chat as well. We have a question from Maxwell.
Hi. This was a great presentation, great talk. So I was just curious, I think on the slide before myth 3, you are showing the gap between men and women. And I noticed on the, for farm size, it looked like, yeah, just before the graph before, yeah, this one. Yeah, I noticed the gap seems to be larger for the large farmers or large farm size, land size farmers as compared to the small and the medium, and especially the non-linearity in terms of the farm size and the gap between men and women. So I was just wondering what, if you have any insights of why that is the case, or yeah, thank you.
Maybe I can start first, and Dr. Deepa, you can, if you can want to add, then you can add later. So the reason of this, there is a gap with the large farm and then the small farm is that because the large farmer is the one who actually leads the canals, so they have more access to the water than the small groups and medium farm groups. And they also have more power to control sluice gate. In Bangladesh, the polar region, in the coastal region, canal actually maintain or operated using sluice gate. So when water will come, water will goes, it's all depend on the sluice gate operations, and it's all actually maintained or managed by these large farm groups. So that's why they have more access to water.
I see. I see. Okay, thanks for that insight.
Additional questions?
So if there are no more questions, we can perhaps close the session.
Yes. I actually had one quick question before we close the session. I noticed on the next slide, if you could go to that one. If I'm not mistaken, there in terms of the harassment, you mentioned I can see on the graph that there's a slightly higher percentage of men experiencing the harassment compared to women. Does that relate to the social norm that you were discussing, whereby frustration and anger over water is more outwardly expressed amongst men, whereas women internalize that stress?
I think if I can answer, and then maybe Mo can add. So I think both women and men experience harassment, and because water scarcity is so high, as you can see in the picture, during this dry season, the canals completely dry up. So, men tend to be actually especially marginalized men who express their anger and frustration, men from these smallholder marginalized households can be beaten up, can be, there is like bodily harm, risks of that. So there are these levels of harassment. So whereas women experience sort of, I think, in Bangladesh, there isn't, or at least we have not seen, like in many other countries, actually, there is a risk of women being sexually abused when they go out to fetch water. This did not come up in our findings so much, but maybe this was also because of the social norms. But then, what you see there is also, as you rightly pointed out, is women tend to report less because it's shameful to be told that you're harassed and to actually sort of really spell out how you have been harassed. But then we've also heard stories of even women being beaten up when they have argued for and tried to contest water appropriation by the elites, by the social elites. Mo, do you want to add?
No, you perfectly said it's true. So I was present during that time when that's happened to that woman, and she was an NGO worker, and I was really surprised that even she was an NGO worker, she was already cadet, but still she was harassed by the powerful people in the field when she was going to bring her cows, and she was really sexually abused during the time. So yeah, that's happened, but they really don't wanted to express it. They don't want to share it because it's really shameful for them to talk about these things openly or share with others.
Thank you so much for sharing. And that answered my question. Thank you so much. there's that reporting aspect in terms of the measurement. Are there any other questions among the participants?
I have a question to you. It's not
Oh.
regarding the presentation, but regarding our seminar. So,
Uh-huh.
do you have an online platform where you posted these or the news or something like that?
We have the recordings are taken and we can share them with you. If I'm not mistaken, right now they're not on an online platform quite yet.
Okay.
Oh, they are on YouTube. I've just been informed they are on YouTube.
I went to
YouTube.
this YouTube, but it's mostly the PowerPoint presentations into 2024. After that, I did not see any updated video.
I see. I will follow up on that for you and I will get
Maybe I
back to
was
you on
mistaken,
that.
but yeah.
Yes.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay.
They were
Thanks,
posted in
thanks.
the past, but I will follow up on you on that so I can get you that information.
Thank you.
All right. Well, if there are no more questions, we can take your suggestion, Dr. Deepa, and end this session early. I know you guys have an immensely busy schedule. Thank you so much for being here today. This was an extremely insightful presentation. We're honored to have listened to it. And yeah, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for the opportunity. Okay, thanks again.
Sounds
Bye.
good. Thank you so much. Have a great and wonderful day, everyone.
Bye.